When Linda Morrison tried to ticket a federal agent's SUV for aggressive parking presence, she had no idea the decorated vehicle belonged to her new neighbor DEA Special Agent Marcus Webb. What followed became the most spectacular HOA meltdown in Colorado history. The first thing I heard that Tuesday morning in October was the sound of metal scraping against metal. I stepped onto my front porch in Boulder Ridge Estates, coffee still hot in my hand, and found a woman I'd never met, jamming what looked like a universal car key into my Chevy Tahoe's door lock. She was maybe 55? Blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, wearing a lavender cardigan that somehow looked aggressive. "Why won't this master access key work?" she muttered, twisting harder. "This is completely unacceptable." I cleared my throat. "Can I help you?" She spun around like I'd just interrupted a surgical procedure. Her name tag read, Linda Morrison, HOA Compliance Director. The title had clearly been custom-made, complete with gold borders. All vehicles in Boulder Ridge must provide emergency HOA access, she announced, holding up the key like it was a search warrant. "Your refusal to comply is highly suspicious." I hadn't refused anything. I'd been inside, drinking coffee. When her magical key failed for the third time, she gasped and pulled out her phone. Before I could say another word, she dialed 911 right there on my driveway. "Yes. Hello? I need to report a non-compliant male resident blocking mandatory HOA vehicle safety protocols. He's being extremely difficult and his vehicle shows signs of unauthorized federal modification." She pointed at me like I'd just robbed a bank. What Linda didn't know was that the non-compliant male she was reporting to Boulder County Dispatch was DEA Special Agent Marcus Webb. Me. The guy who just transferred from the Denver field office 3 weeks ago. I dealt with cartel enforcers, interstate drug runners, and armed suspects barricaded in meth labs. But nothing in 22 years of federal law enforcement prepared me for Linda Morrison and the weapons-grade absurdity she was about to unleash. To understand how we reached this moment, I need to take you back to September 2024. When I first bought my house on the western edge of Boulder Ridge Estates, my property sat right at the boundary of the HOA's jurisdiction, close enough that Linda could see it from her kitchen window, but far enough that technically, legally, irrefutably, she had zero authority over a single blade of grass on my land. That technicality became the greatest frustration of her entire existence. The first time Linda introduced herself, she didn't say, "Welcome," or "Nice to meet you." She marched up my driveway carrying a 3-ring binder thick enough to stop bullets. "Federal law enforcement vehicles may cause unnecessary resident alarm," she said, gesturing toward my black Tahoe with its tinted windows and government plates. "I'll need you to park that elsewhere. Perhaps a storage facility," I explained, politely, that my vehicle was federally registered, legally parked on private property, and completely immune to her personal comfort level. She smiled, one of those smiles that never reaches the eyes, made a note in her binder, and walked away like she was filing evidence for my future prosecution. 2 days later, I found a bright orange sticker plastered across my Tahoe's windshield. In bold letters, unauthorized federal insignia visible from public view, $50 fine. Federal insignia. She meant the DEA seal on the door. I actually laughed standing there in my driveway at 7 o'clock, peeling off her homemade citation. I tucked it into a folder on my kitchen counter. At the time, I didn't know that folder would eventually become 3 massive binders. Over the next 2 months, Linda issued violations that defied logic, physics, and occasionally the English language. Once, she tried to fine me for leaving vehicular impression patterns after it rained, tire tracks, in my own driveway. Another time, She cited me for visual intimidation because sunlight reflected off my chrome side mirrors in a way she described as authoritarian and threatening. But the incident that truly ignited her crusade came in late October when she knocked on my door holding a clipboard and wearing what I can only describe as a homemade security badge. The HOA board requires duplicate keys for all resident vehicles, she announced, for emergency purposes. I looked at her for a long moment. Absolutely not. She blinked rapidly, like her brain was buffering. Excuse me? No. You're not getting keys to my vehicle. Her jaw tightened. Mr. Webb, this is non-negotiable. Actually, Linda, it's completely negotiable. And my answer is no. She lifted her chin, nostrils flaring slightly. We'll revisit this conversation. I should have known that phrase meant trouble. Fast forward to that October morning when she jammed her brass master key into my door lock and called 911. After Boulder County Dispatch patched her through to someone who calmly explained that she'd just filed a false report about a federal agent, Linda stood frozen on my driveway, her face cycling through several shades of pink. Deputy Ramirez, who'd responded to the call, looked at me and then at Linda. Ma'am, do you understand who you just reported? Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. This is Special Agent Webb with the DEA. Ramirez continued, barely suppressing a grin. And you just accused him of vehicle non-compliance with HOA protocols. He closed his notepad. Ma'am, you cannot call 911 for HOA disputes, especially not for imaginary ones. Linda's face finally settled on crimson. She spun on her heel and stormed off without another word, orthopedic sandals slapping against the pavement like angry applause. I thought the humiliation might slow her down. Instead, it was gasoline on a fire. By the next morning, the entire neighborhood was papered with bright pink flyers. They hung from mailboxes, lampposts, trash cans, even taped to car windows. The heading, written in aggressive all caps with star stickers around the border, urgent community action required, stop the non-compliant vehicle threat. The flyer described my Tahoe as a community risk, claimed I'd refuse to participate in mandatory HOA vehicle safety verification, and called for an emergency vote to require all neighborhood vehicles to provide universal HOA access credentials. She wanted keys to everyone's cars. My neighbor Tom knocked on my door that afternoon, holding one of the flyers. Is this about you? Apparently, he groaned. She fined me last month because my sedan was too blue. Said it was visually destabilizing that evening. I found another citation under my windshield wiper, notice of parking violation, excessive vehicle presence, $75 fine. Excessive presence. In my own driveway. I added it to the binder. The following night, Linda held what she called an HOA Emergency Safety Summit. Someone recorded it and texted me the video. Watching it felt like witnessing a TED Talk delivered by someone who'd read half a Wikipedia article on authoritarianism and decided to give dictatorship a shot. Her PowerPoint presentation included a pie chart labeling my Tahoe as the #1 cause of community instability, a grainy photo of my vehicle taken from a suspiciously low angle, and a slide titled Threat Indicators Listing Size, Color, Window Tint, Federal Symbolism, Owner Defiance. She concluded by declaring that Boulder Ridge must take immediate action to restore driveway equilibrium. One brave resident raised a hand. Isn't that the DEA agent's truck? Linda's eyes flashed. Authority does not exempt anyone from community standards. By the next morning, 4 new violations appeared on my Tahoe: reflective surface disruption, unauthorized federal imagery, driveway shadow imbalance, Intimidation via vehicular height. Driveway shadow imbalance. She was now finding me for the shape of my car's shadow. That's when I realized this wasn't just petty HOA drama. Linda was escalating toward something bigger. She wasn't annoyed by my truck. She was obsessed with controlling it. Controlling me. Controlling everything within her self-appointed kingdom. And my driveway wasn't even under HOA jurisdiction. I knew then I needed to document everything with the same precision I'd use building a federal case. I started gathering photos of every flyer, every citation, screenshots of emails, recordings of her meetings, statements from neighbors who also felt targeted, copies of the master key policy she kept referencing but couldn't produce. I wasn't building a case out of spite. I was doing it because I could see exactly where Linda was heading, straight toward a legal collision. And just when I thought she couldn't possibly escalate further, she proved me catastrophically wrong. The next morning, I stepped outside to find 28 small neon orange flags lining both sides of my driveway in perfectly symmetrical rows. They looked like a bizarre landing strip. Each flag carried the same message: HOA claim pending, vehicle access gate under review. A gate. Linda was planning to build a gate across my driveway to control vehicle access. The footprints in the soil around the flags were unmistakable. Those orthopedic sandals left a very specific tread pattern. I pulled one from the ground and photographed everything: the spacing, the footprints, the position relative to my property line. Evidence. Always evidence. A few minutes later, I heard the distinctive clack, clack, clack of Linda's sandals approaching. She appeared at the edge of my driveway, clipboard pressed against her chest like a holy relic. "Good morning," she said, voice tight, with forced politeness. "Morning." "Linda." She adjusted her oversized, rhinestone-studded sunglasses. "I see you've discovered the preliminary boundary markers." Boundary markers. The HOA has initiated a vehicle access evaluation for community safety purposes. I held up one of her flags. On my property, property lines are fluid when it comes to safety concerns. I raised an eyebrow. Fluid? Yes. As acting HOA Compliance Director, I have full authority to take precautionary measures when residents refuse to cooperate. She nodded toward my Tahoe. "And your vehicle's defiance is extensively documented." My vehicle's defiance. It refused universal access protocols. She continued. I let the silence hang there. Finally, I gestured at the flags. "You planted these yourself." "Of course I did," she said proudly. "The board was unanimous." That was a lie. I knew for a fact that the HOA board was exhausted by Linda's antics. "Unanimous?" I asked. She shifted slightly. "Unanimous in spirit." I took a step closer, keeping my tone calm but firm. "Linda, this is private property. You're trespassing. And these flags, this gate you're planning, have no legal standing whatsoever." Her chin snapped up. "Not yet." Linda clutched her clipboard tighter. "I'll be drafting an amendment for next month's HOA meeting. The community will vote to place all vehicles within visual proximity of HOA land under shared authority." "It's illegal," I said flatly. She scoffed. "Laws adapt. Communities evolve. Besides, residents deserve protection from rogue vehicles." I took another photo of Linda standing proudly among her flags. She stiffened. "What are you doing?" "Documenting. You can't intimidate me." She snapped, though her voice wavered. "I will not be threatened by someone who thinks he's above community standards just because he works for the government." I smiled. "Linda, I think you're forgetting something. You called 911 on a federal agent." Her face flushed pink. That was a misunderstanding. You told dispatch I was refusing an HOA inspection. I stand by that assessment. You told them I was suspicious. You were suspicious? I was holding a cup of coffee. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Without another word, she spun on her heel and marched off, leaving me standing in a driveway full of neon flags. That afternoon, while I was driving back from the field office in Denver, I saw a tow truck parked suspiciously close to my driveway. The driver stood next to it, scratching his head, staring at a piece of paper. I pulled up and stepped out. Everything okay? He looked at me, then down at the paper, then back at me. Lady from the HOA said this truck was abandoned and needed immediate removal. She said it hadn't moved in weeks, and the owner was refusing safety compliance checks. I pointed to the DEA emblem on the door. I'm the owner. And I drove it yesterday? The man's face went pale. Oh. She didn't mention... He folded the paper and shoved it in his pocket. Sorry. Sir. I'm leaving. Right now. He climbed into the tow truck and peeled out like he was fleeing a crime scene. Linda wasn't trying to annoy me. She was constructing a narrative where I was the problem, the danger, the threat to Boulder Ridge's fragile peace. Later that evening, I walked outside and removed every single flag. One by one. I gathered them into a box, photographed the empty ground, and labeled the container Evidence, Vehicle Incidents, Morrison, L. Linda wasn't finished. The master key was her opening move. The flags were her expansion attempt. She was preparing something bigger. Something with paperwork. Something with signatures? Something she believed would finally grant her the authority she'd invented in her head. I woke up the next morning expecting normalcy. The universe had other plans. When I stepped outside with my coffee, I froze. My truck was booted. A massive yellow wheel clamp was locked onto the front tire. Bold, stenciled letters across the metal read, HOA Impound, Non-Compliant Vehicle. I set my coffee on the hood and crouched down to inspect the clamp. It was real. Heavy-duty steel. Professional grade. A laminated tag dangled from the lock. Release fee, $375. Processing fee, $30. Administrative fee, $20. Total due, $425. Behind me, I heard the triumphant shuffle of orthopedic sandals. Well, Linda called out, arms crossed. Perhaps now you'll learn to respect community authority. I stood slowly. You put a boot on my truck. It's not your truck. It's a community-adjacent vehicle subject to oversight. Immobilization was necessary after repeated violations. I exhaled through my nose. Linda, this is illegal. No. This is proactive neighborhood safety enforcement. You immobilized a federal law enforcement vehicle. Her eyes narrowed. A vehicle used to intimidate residents. Frankly, you should thank me for holding you accountable. I actually laughed. Linda, remove the clamp. She recoiled. Absolutely not. You will pay the release fee just like everyone else would. Linda, you cannot impound someone's vehicle. Especially not on private property. She smirked. We'll see what the board says. They authorized this action. At that exact moment, my neighbor Diane peeked out from behind her front curtain and made frantic eye contact with me. She shook her head violently and mouthed, "No. Absolutely not." Caught in her lie. Linda pivoted instantly. Well, they didn't oppose it. That's not the same thing. It is, in spirit. she declared. I pulled out my phone. Linda stiffened. I took photos of the clamp, the tag, her standing there, looking triumphant. She scoffed. Oh, please. You think pictures will scare me? No, I said evenly. But they'll help the sheriff's department. Her lips parted in horror. Sheriff. You wouldn't dare. Oh, I dare. I dialed the Boulder County non-emergency line and requested a deputy respond for unlawful vehicle immobilization. Linda panicked. You're weaponizing law enforcement. This is harassment. I pointed at the boot. You immobilized a government asset. Before she could argue further, a patrol car rolled into view. Deputy Castillo stepped out, took one look at the boot, then turned to me. Morning. Agent Webb. Castillo. Linda threw her hands up. Finally, someone reasonable. Officer, arrest him for refusing to follow HOA impoundment protocol. Castillo stared at her for a long moment. Ma'am, there is no such thing as HOA impoundment protocol. There should be, she shouted. That's not how laws work. She jabbed her pen toward the boot. This vehicle is out of compliance. Stop, I said, raising a finger. Do not confess to more crimes. Castillo sighed and pulled out his notepad. Ma'am, did you place this device on Agent Webb's vehicle? I issued a lawful community corrective action. Did you purchase this boot online? Yes. It's heavy duty. Comes in 3 colors? Ma'am, you cannot immobilize property you don't own. This is tampering with a vehicle? Potentially criminal mischief and interference with federal property. She gasped. Criminal mischief. How dare you imply... He's not implying... I said. He's reading the statute. This is oppression. She shrieked. Of the HOA. Castillo wrote out an official warning and instructed her to remove the boot immediately. She refused. He repeated the instruction. She refused again. Finally, Castillo said, If you don't remove it within the next 60 seconds, we will... And you'll be charged with obstruction. The glare Linda gave him could have stripped paint, but she stomped over to the boot, fumbled angrily with the lock, and yanked it off the tire. She dragged it away, muttering about tyranny and rogue federal agencies. She left without another word. 2 days later, she returned with paperwork. Stacks of it. Glossy brochures she'd clearly designed herself, titled, The Great Vehicle Harmony Initiative. She taped them to every door in Boulder Ridge Estates. Mandatory HOA access keys for all vehicles. HOA-controlled parking rotation schedules. Monthly driveway compliance inspections. Fines for visually disruptive automobile silhouettes. That week, I received 14 separate violations. Parking too confidently. Vehicle presence exceeding comfort threshold. Potential intimidation due to height. License plate numerically aggressive. Unauthorized reflective surfaces. Excessive durability. Owner attitude. Non-compliant. Truck windows too transparent. Driving patterns unpredictable. Tire tread emotionally sharp. Paint, color too authoritative. Shadow length exceeds 4 feet. DEA emblem improper for suburban setting. Vehicular, aura, intimidating. I documented everything. Made a second binder. Then a third. After watching me gather evidence with federal precision, Linda changed tactics. The next escalation came on a quiet Thursday afternoon in early November. I returned from the grocery store to find a plywood barricade erected across the entrance to my driveway. Spray painted across it in red letters, HOA parking zone, authorized vehicles only. Zip ties held the structure together. I stepped out of my truck, walked over, lifted the entire structure with one hand. It weighed maybe 10 pounds, and set it neatly beside a tree. I stuck a Post-it note on it. Nice try. Wrong property. The next day, a city building inspector knocked on my door. Got a call about a dangerous illegal parking structure on this property. I showed him the barricade. He snorted. Yeah. No. This isn't up to code. Or reality. He took photos, made notes, and left chuckling. Linda watched from across the street, arms folded, seething. She didn't speak that day, but her silence felt worse. Calculated, focused. The eerie quiet that settled over Boulder Ridge after the barricade incident wasn't peaceful. It felt like the silence before a Colorado wildfire. Linda had vanished for almost 3 full days. And for someone who thrived on daily micromanagement, that silence wasn't a white flag. It was preparation. It arrived on the morning of the 4th day. I opened my mailbox, and a thick, glossy packet slid out. The cover featured a professional-looking photo of a winding suburban street with cartoon sparkles photoshopped around parked cars. Across the top, in bold serif font, the Community Vehicle Harmony Initiative, presented by Boulder Ridge Mobility Council. A council? We didn't have a council. I leaned against the mailbox and flipped it open. The first page featured a letter from the desk of Acting Coordinator L. Morrison. Linda had rebranded herself. Again, the letter claimed that due to recent vehicular disturbances caused by resistance to universal access measures, Boulder Ridge would now implement mandatory regulations. All vehicles must be registered with the Mobility Council. Owners must provide emergency access keys upon request. Driveways may be inspected without notice for compliance. Parking zones may be reassigned at any time for harmony redistribution. Unauthorized vehicle silhouette patterns will incur penalties. At the back of the packet, a payment page. Mobility Harmony Contribution Fee, $95, due within 5 days. She'd included a QR code linking to a Venmo account named Boulder Vehicle Safety. I looked up. Linda stood across the street by her silver Prius, dressed in a navy blazer and khaki slacks, wearing what appeared to be a Bluetooth earpiece, very clearly not connected to anything. I held up the booklet. A new council. Linda. She nodded proudly. Formed due to overwhelming community demand. What community? Residents have expressed significant concern. Name one. She blinked. Concerns may remain anonymous. For safety. Safety from what? My truck shadow. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Your vehicle has become a symbol of disorder. People are frightened. A strong neighborhood cannot function when residents feel threatened by unpredictable silhouettes. I flipped the packet closed. Linda, this is fraud. She stiffened. This is community leadership. What you're doing is illegal. What I'm doing is necessary. For who? For everyone. Linda, you cannot create fake councils to collect fees. You cannot demand keys to people's vehicles. You cannot find shadows. She smiled, tight and brittle. We'll see what the legal advisory panel thinks. Who's on the panel? I asked. She hesitated. Me. I almost choked. So you created a council, appointed yourself coordinator, and then created a legal panel, which is also you. She crossed her arms. Someone has to take responsibility. Before I could respond, she thrust a clipboard toward me. Sign the compliance acknowledgement. I didn't touch it. No. Very well. She scribbled furiously. Refusal to acknowledge, notice, Additional fee, $17. She walked off, convinced she'd won. Inside my house, I spread everything across the dining table. The packet, the fines, photos of the boot, the barricade, screenshots from neighbors. I called the Boulder County Sheriff's Office. Deputy Castillo took the report. Boulder Ridge Mobility Council. Never heard of it. It didn't exist until yesterday. I said. He whistled. She really doesn't know when to stop. No, she really doesn't. Send me everything. This might cross into fraud territory. I emailed him the documents, photos, timestamps, links. That evening, my neighbor Diane approached cautiously. Can we talk? She whispered. Of course. She stepped closer. The board. We need your help. We're done. We can't deal with her anymore. She told the board we needed to create a parking brigade, weekly driveway inspections. And she tried to fine one of the board members because her Honda CR-V felt rebellious. I gestured toward my dining room, stacked with binders. I've got evidence. Diane's eyes widened. How much? Binders. Plural. 4 so far. She let out a breath. This could work. But you have to be there. The board meeting is next Friday. I'll be there. She hesitated. One more thing. Is it true she called 911 on you and didn't know you were DEA? Correct. Diane covered her face and groaned. Oh my God. She left with a promise. The board would prepare the motion to remove Linda as HOA president. But Linda wasn't going to sit quietly. The next morning, another packet appeared. Emergency Vehicle Harmony Audit. Mandatory participation required. Inside was a form threatening a $175 non-participation fee. She'd also slipped a handwritten note under my doormat. Your resistance only strengthens my resolve. Later that afternoon, bewildered residents approached me. She fined me for washing my car too loudly. She fined me because my headlights were too assertive. She fined me for insufficient wheel humility. Every ridiculous fine was more evidence that would end her presidency and bring her face to face with real legal consequences. I arrived at the HOA meeting 30 minutes early. The board had asked me to help set up chairs, test the projector, and provide emotional security. The Boulder Ridge Community Center was already buzzing with quiet tension. People whispered in clusters, clutching copies of the Mobility Harmony packet. Others held up phones displaying screenshots of absurd fines. One guy had printed an enormous poster of the wheel humility violation and taped it to the wall with the caption, "How is this real?" Diane approached me nervously. She doesn't know what we're planning. She'll know in about 20 minutes. Right on cue. The door slammed open. Linda swept in like royalty. Navy blazer. Fake Bluetooth earpiece. Clipboard resting on her forearm. Stack of Mobility Council packets tucked under her other arm. There will be order, she announced. It hasn't started. Someone muttered. Diane stepped forward. Thank you all for coming. Tonight's meeting will address... I'll be handling tonight's meeting. Linda interrupted. Given the heightened threat level to neighborhood vehicular harmony... No, Diane said sharply. Linda blinked. No, that's correct. The board will handle this meeting. You will sit down. Linda's jaw dropped. Sit down. Yes. In the audience. Like everyone else. Linda's eyes snapped toward me, searching for backup. But I simply folded my arms and leaned against the wall. I am the HOA president. Linda hissed. For now. Someone in the back whispered. Linda spun around. Who said that? No one answered. Diane cleared her throat. Please take your seat. Finally, Linda huffed and stomped into a metal chair in the front row. Diane introduced the agenda. Tonight, the board will address the concerning actions taken by our HOA president. These include unauthorized fines, fraudulent documents, attempts to collect money under a non-existent organization, and repeated harassment of multiple residents. Murmurs rippled through the room. Linda shot to her feet. Lies. All of it. I did what I had to do to protect this community from vehicular anarchy. Sit, Diane said. Shockingly, Linda sat. Diane gestured toward me. Agent Webb, would you please present your findings? I stepped to the front with a simple folder. Good evening. Most of you know me as your neighbor. Some of you recently learned I'm also a DEA Special Agent. I've lived here since September. Until recently. I never imagined I'd need to speak at an HOA meeting. But here we are. I laid the folder on the table. First, the incident where Linda attempted to forcibly access my vehicle using a so-called master key. She then called 911 to report me as a suspicious individual refusing an HOA inspection. I held up a photo of her, brass key in hand, crouched by my Tahoe's door. She did not know that she was calling 911 on a federal agent. Gasps filled the room. Next, Linda issued dozens of unauthorized fines targeting multiple residents, charges for aggressive headlights, non-compliant wheel angles, emotional lawn imbalance caused by vehicle placement. These are not real violations. They do not exist in any HOA bylaw. Heads nodded. People whispered angrily. Then there was the wheel clamp she placed on my vehicle. I displayed a photo of the boot on the projector. Linda made a strangled noise but didn't interrupt. I continued laying out each incident, the plywood barricade, the neon flags, the fraudulent mobility council, the payment demands, the Venmo account. She attempted to collect money through an unregistered organization. That constitutes attempted fraud. Linda erupted. I was acting in the interest of the community. Linda, you immobilized a federal agent's vehicle with a boot you bought on Amazon. That boot was high quality. She shrieked. A man in the back burst out laughing. Diane held up her hand. Order, please. I finished my presentation. The evidence has been submitted to the Boulder County Sheriff's Office. An investigation is ongoing. However, the HOA board can take action tonight regarding Linda's status as president. A board member stood. We moved to vote on the immediate removal of Linda Morrison as HOA president. The room erupted in applause. Linda jumped to her feet, eyes wild. No, you can't do this. I am the only one holding this community together. Without me, you'll descend into parking mayhem. Diane didn't flinch. All those in favor? Hands shot up across the room. Dozens of them. All opposed. Linda shot her hand up. Alone. Trembling with fury? Diane nodded. Motion carries. Linda Morrison is removed as HOA president, effective immediately. The collective exhale from the crowd felt like the first breeze after a long drought. Linda stood in stunned silence. Then she grabbed her clipboard, pointed at me, and shouted, "This isn't over. You can't escape harmony. I will return stronger than ever." She stormed out of the building, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. The room sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then applause filled the air. People clapped, cheered, laughed. I just stood there, watching the door she'd stormed through, knowing Linda wasn't done. Linda didn't retreat. Linda regrouped. The evening after Linda's removal was the most peaceful Boulder Ridge had felt in months. People lingered outside, chatting on sidewalks, watering plants, walking dogs. Someone even joked they could finally wash their car without violating vehicular emotional etiquette. But peace, in my experience, is not the end of a story. Linda didn't show up the next day, or the day after. Most people celebrated her absence, but I dealt with Linda long enough to know better. Linda didn't accept defeat. She repackaged it. A strange envelope appeared in my mailbox Friday morning, printed professionally on linen paper, sealed with a gold circle sticker. The return address, P. O. Box 442, Bluff County Oversight Initiative. Inside was a formal notice. Dear resident, due to recent concerns regarding vehicle compliance and driveway harmony, you are requested to attend a mandatory mediation session with the Bluff Community Oversight Initiative, BCOI. Failure to appear may result in further action. Signed, Acting Coordinator, L. Morrison. She'd reinvented herself. Again, not an HOA anymore. A private entity. A fake oversight initiative. She'd even included a voluntary community contribution form with a suggested payment of $150 toward a driveway beautification project. The Venmo link pointed straight to an account under her name. I photographed every page and filed them into my Linda Evidence Volume 5 folder. Deputy Castillo came by. I handed him the letter. He skimmed it and shook his head. She's really trying to reinvent the HOA. Not reinvent. Reincarnate. She sent the same letter to half a dozen residents. Somebody dropped theirs off at the station this morning. She's doubled down. She's entering criminal territory. This is impersonation of authority and attempted collection of fraudulent fees. Can we charge her? Not yet. But we're looking into it closely. That night, my motion sensor light flicked on at 11:52. I checked the security camera feed. It was Linda. She wore a reflective safety vest, cargo pants, work gloves, and carried a tape measure, a clipboard, and a laser level. She paced back and forth along the perimeter of my driveway. She knelt and measured the angle of my Tahoe's front tire, scribbled furiously. Then she measured its distance from the lawn edge. Then she held the laser level against the fender. I stepped outside onto the porch. Evening. Linda. She gasped and dropped her tape measure. I was conducting an assessment. At midnight. Timing is irrelevant when harmony is at stake. Linda, get off my property. I have authority under the Oversight Initiative. No. You have a vest you bought on Amazon? She bristled. A uniform. A vest. Linda, you're obstructing justice. No. I'm obstructing trespassing. I pointed at the camera. You're being recorded. She froze. She hated when her actions were captured. She backed away slowly, muttering, "This will not stop harmony. This will not stop the initiative." Then she disappeared into the darkness. Reflective vest? Sparkling? The next morning, half the neighborhood found envelopes identical to mine. I collected 12 more letters from neighbors and forwarded everything to Deputy Castillo. He called 20 minutes later. Yeah, I think we have enough for charges. This initiative isn't registered with the state. She's fabricating documents and presenting them as legal authority. Do what you need to do. He hesitated. One problem. She's probably expecting retaliation. She might have a meltdown before we can serve the papers. He was right. The meltdown came that same afternoon. I was working in my garage when I heard shouting from the street. I walked out and saw Linda standing beside her Prius, waving a giant rolled-up poster. The community is at risk. The DEA vehicle is a threat to harmony. Then she unrolled the poster. It was a blown-up satellite image of Boulder Ridge with my Tahoe circled dramatically in red marker, surrounded by arrows and labels. Unknown vehicle energy zone. Potential disruption field. Driveway dominance risk. A kid down the street whispered, "Is he a superhero?" Linda spun on him. "No. He is a menace." At that moment, 2 Boulder County Sheriff's cruisers pulled into the street. Linda paled. Deputy Castillo stepped out and approached. "Linda Morrison, we need to speak with you." She puffed up her chest. "Ah. Finally, justice arrives." "Yes, it does." He handed her a packet of papers. She skimmed the first lines. Then she screamed. It was the sound of a woman whose imaginary empire had just collapsed under real-world law. "You can't do this. I am the initiative. No, you are being charged with harassment, falsifying documents, and attempting to operate an unlicensed entity. My initiative is legal. It doesn't exist. It exists spiritually. Spiritual HOAs don't count." She stomped, ranted, waved her arms, declared herself a guardian of peace, and accused me of leading a coup. When she finally ran out of breath, Castillo spoke again. "Ma'am, you are formally ordered to cease all oversight activity. You are not to contact residents with demands, letters, or directives. Violate this, and further action will follow." Linda stared at me, with fire in her eyes. "This is your doing." "No, this is your doing." She got into her Prius, slammed the door, and sped off. For the first time, she didn't yell out the window. That evening, Boulder Ridge felt different. Lighter, calmer. Parents walked their kids. Teenagers skateboarded. The shadow of Linda's clipboard tyranny faded. Days passed quietly. Then a week. Then 2. The Boulder County Sheriff's Office processed her case. She complied with the cease and desist order. Castillo kept me updated. She's keeping her distance. Then came the night that confirmed it. Late, close to midnight. My trail camera pinged. Motion detected. Back fence. I opened the feed. A figure stood at the border of my property, just outside the legal line. Not crossing it. Not approaching. Just standing there, motionless, staring toward my house. Medium height. Reflective vest. Linda. She didn't move for nearly 10 minutes. Just stared. Then she turned and disappeared into the trees. She'd followed the order. Stayed off my land. But the message was clear. She hadn't let go. 2 weeks later, the final chapter arrived. A package. Delivered by courier. No return address. Addressed to DEA Agent Webb, Boulder Ridge. Inside, pink tissue paper. Underneath, a smaller silver box. Inside that, a glitter bomb. A disarmed one. Just glitter sitting harmlessly at the bottom. There was a note taped to the lid. "This is what restraint looks like. You're lucky I'm taking the high road." She wasn't threatening me. She was performing one final act of petty rebellion, to remind me she wasn't gone. Just relocating. Deputy Castillo stopped by that evening. When I showed him the package, he shook his head. "She mailed you a disabled glitter bomb as a peace offering / threat. Peak HOA creativity. She's not coming back. Agent Webb. At least not here. I know. But she's not done. He sighed. No. People like her never are. Spring arrived in Colorado. Boulder Ridge returned to something resembling normal. Greg, the new HOA president, sent me a handwritten letter thanking me for my patience during the great vehicle crisis and included a jar of homemade honey. That's when Sarah, who worked part-time at the Boulder County Records Office, stopped by with a folder. You need to see this. Inside, registered paperwork for a new HOA being established roughly 40 miles south near Castle Rock. Incomplete. Sloppy. Missing signatures. But one section was filled out clearly. Proposed HOA President Linda Morrison. She's starting over. Sarah said, new neighborhood. New people to control. They don't know her history. I nodded. They will. Are you going to warn them? No. Some lessons can't be taught. Only experienced. Sarah exhaled. Well, at least she's not here anymore. Exactly. Months passed. Deputy Castillo was promoted to sergeant. Boulder Ridge regained its sanity. Every once in a while, when I sat on my porch watching the flatirons glow in the sunset, I'd think back to the chaos Linda brought. But it didn't make me angry anymore. It made me grateful. Because you can't appreciate peace without surviving a few storms. Even storms wearing lavender cardigans and wielding unauthorized master keys. One morning, a new couple walked down the trail with their golden retriever. They paused at the fork where Linda once built her plywood barricade, looked around, confused, then continued toward the park. I waved. They waved back. Community doesn't require control. It doesn't require authority. It doesn't require fines, citations, or laminated threats. Sometimes, all it takes is a wave, a shared path, a neighborly gesture, and the absence of someone screaming about vehicular silhouettes. Linda was gone. Boulder Ridge was ours again. The neighborhood was free. And somewhere 40 miles south, a new HOA board was unknowingly about to learn that no matter where she goes, Linda Morrison will always bring her clipboard. If this whole saga taught me anything, it's that real authority doesn't come from titles, clipboards, or made-up regulations. It comes from responsibility, respect, and understanding the limits of your role. Linda built her world on control, imagined control, and when reality pushed back, she collapsed under the weight of her own inventions. There will always be people who try to impose their will on others, not because they're right, but because they're afraid of losing relevance. The best thing you can do? Stand your ground. Document the truth. And let their actions speak louder than your frustration. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done if someone tried to unlock your car with a master key? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable HOA stories.